Well, welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Meet the Author. Today we have Elizabeth O'Rourke here. Thank you so much for joining us, Elizabeth.
Thanks for having me.
So glad that you could jump on with us today. So, I always like to start off these interviews with an easy icebreaker type question just to kind of ease us in. So, today my question is, do you prefer chocolate or do you prefer vanilla?
Are we talking about the candy? Or are we talking like, is this like a.
In general, like chocolate cake, vanilla ice.
Okay. I just wasn't like you say vanilla, and I'm a romance author. I immediately think you mean sex. So I hadn't heard about like the chocolate part of it, but I was like, oh, maybe that's some kind of code word. Um,
Ice cream cake, just flavors.
oh, okay. Vanilla.
Perfect. I feel like, it could I see how that question could have been very confusing, very misleading.
I just didn't want to accidentally, like, I don't know.
Be like, "Yeah,
I never know what the lingo is.
I
Yeah.
really like this type of sex in my books," and I'm like,
Yeah.
"I was talking about cake." That's awesome. Well, like you just mentioned, you're a romance author, but for some people who maybe are just watching this on YouTube for the first time, or maybe just clicked on this podcast on Spotify, who maybe haven't heard of you before, kind of just walk us through who you are, how you got into this industry, and all of that.
Okay. As I said, I'm a romance author. I do mostly contemporary romance, although I do have one paranormal series. Um, I got started. I used to be a medical writer, and so I wrote, like, when you go to your doctor's office and you get like the really boring brochure about like whatever surgery. I might have written that brochure, probably not, but because it was a while ago. But so I did that for a long time, and then I was staying home with my kids, and I was reading all of these indie romances. All of a sudden, I just out of nowhere, I think Twilight was like the gateway drug for a bunch of us. But when Twilight came out, all of a sudden I was just like reading romances like crazy. And I was just at one point I was like, well, I'd like to try to do one, and so I did.
That's awesome. So how long have you been writing? When was you first published your first book?
I published my first book in 2013.
That's awesome. Wow. Over
Yeah,
10 years now. That's crazy.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I wish I'd been more prolific, but initially I was, like especially with indie writing, you kind of have to publish pretty fast.
Mhm.
So the standard is like 3 to 6 books a year, somewhere in there. And I didn't realize that, so I was just kind of like writing one every 2 years or so, like la la la, taking my time. And now I know better. I wish that I had known this in 2013, because I'd live in a much nicer house if I did. But anyway, yeah. So I didn't really get going until about 2019.
That's awesome though. I mean, again, the fact that you were able to do all of that. With your writing, obviously, you just said you wish you would have known in 2013 how many books, a year for being indie.
Yeah.
What is that writing process like for you now that you're trying to put out, multiple books, from, start to finish? Kind of walk us through that, what your process is from, okay, I have these, plotted ideas in my head towards the finishing of a book.
Okay. I generally don't really have plotted ideas in my head. I just kind of have like an idea of like the vibe between the two main characters. And usually, most of my books are enemies to lovers. So usually it's just I kind of got some banter in my head, like ways that they hate each other and express that. And I kind of know what their professions are. And I just kind of play around from there. And I will normally write a lot of the dialogue. Like, I've got a book that won't come out until 2025 that I've already written like an eighth of, and it's all dialogue. And it's just dialogue from different parts of the book, because that's the part that I like to write the best. I like banter. And that's the part that, I mean, that's what comes first. And eventually when it comes time for me to write that book, I'll take all those pieces and I'll flesh them out and then kind of create it from there.
That's awesome. So do you typically stay about a year ahead when it
No.
comes to your writing, or is it just this specific book that is, like, already almost, halfway plotted out?
I normally will write like several years ahead, like just like an eighth of the book. Like the book that I just finished that won't come out till May, I wrote probably a quarter of it in 2018. And like what I do is I'll write these things that I like, but they aren't finished. And then when it's time for me to write a new book, I'll go back and be like, huh, what did I write that didn't suck? And I'll look back through everything that I've done, and then I'll kind of pick something.
So how with obviously, we're gonna talk a lot about your book that comes out tomorrow, part of your summer series. How does that work, once it's going through your series that you just decide, okay, these vibes kind of go together and we can make it work, or what's that process like for you?
Um, like, how do I choose where it's going to come in the series, or?
Well, you said, sometimes you go write it and then you're going back and like, okay, which ideas or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, and I
How do you
guess,
pull that together into a series?
yeah, I mean, honestly, like I started, so this whole thing started off with The Summer I Fell.
Hmm.
And I did not initially intend for it to be a series. I mean, as an indie, you really need to write in series because it helps. But that wasn't really in my head. But I did have bits of these other books written. And I was like, all right, well, then I'm just going to, these are the friends, and I'm going to use these for the next books. And so I did already kind of have, I already had parts of the second book done, parts of the third book done, parts of the fourth book done. The only book that wasn't at all written was book 5 that'll come out like late summer.
That's awesome. I think that's cool that you're able, to connect that and everything. With these books, again, obviously I like that it's, summer. And so it's very perfectly fitting by the time it's like wrapping up that it'll be summertime
Yeah.
and everything. So you go through, you kind of pick these characters, you put it all together into one. Do you feel like out of these books so far, you had one that flowed easier than another, or one that just spoke to you that you feel like you wrote faster from the three that have come out, or the one tomorrow comes out? So almost the three that are out there.
Yeah. I mean, of these books, so the second book tortured me. Like this whole series would have come out a long time ago, except book 2, I could not finish. I mean, I had written it, but I didn't like it. So I rewrote it and rewrote it and rewrote it. And I couldn't publish book 3 because it kind of hinges on what happens in book 2.
Hmm.
um or I couldn't publish book 3. Book 3 came really easily, and I have loved it from the start. The one that comes out tomorrow is probably, it's probably my favorite of the series other than book 5. um so, which I'm writing now, so.
That's awesome. That's so fun, and I think it's cool when I don't know how you guys do it because 'cause you're like, "Okay, I have to actively promote this book that comes out tomorrow," but then I'm writing the 5th book, so my head's I don't know how you keep it straight.
It's funny because, so I'm just turning in book 4 this week to my editor, and yeah, and so my head is completely on book 4 and book 5. And like, even when I'm thinking ahead for like interviews this week, like I want to talk about the characters in book 4. I'm like, there's Liam and there's Emmy and this is what's going on. And I'm already like, I've already got like teasers pulled together and I'm all excited about it. And I kind of almost, I mean, I remember the book that comes out tomorrow, but
Yeah,
like almost an afterthought at this point because I finished it in early November. So,
that's crazy. I mean, that's a while ago.
yeah.
That's awesome. So, I'm kind of getting the vibe, and I love to ask this question just because it's
Yeah.
fun to say, but, so would you say that you're more of a pantser instead of a plotter?
Big time. In fact, I just had a meeting with, like, there's this thing called, I don't know if you've ever heard of it. It's called like the Gallup like Strengths
Mhm.
Finder. It's this thing, but then you can get coached on it, and it's like how it impacts your writing, and anybody can take this test. But there are impacts on like how you perform professionally. And this guy was listening to me, and he was looking at my strengths, and he's like, "Dude, you have got to start plotting. You are torturing yourself." And I was like, "I know." So I don't plot, but yeah, I should.
Whatever works for you. Obviously, you've been doing this long enough, like, you know what works for you. It's very different from everyone I ask, and that's why it's fun for me to ask, because it's so different, every time someone is like, "Oh, I do this, and I do this," and y'all's processes are also different, and you still have all these incredible stories, and I think it's really cool.
And I think after, especially after you've written a couple of them, you kind of just already like inherently know, like, you know, that like at least my books, because they're slow burn, you know that they're going to like, things are going to start ramping up at the 50% point. You know that at about 70% point, stuff's going to start to go wrong. And, so you kind of have a feel for like how it should flow. So I am going to attempt to plot, but for book 5, we'll see. That was what I swore to myself because I just started working on it this week, and I'm like, I'm going to try to plot. And then I sat down and I was like, this is boring. So
So let's talk some about The Summer You Found Me. Comes out tomorrow, but I'll be posting this probably tomorrow, so it comes out today,
okay.
on the 25th. We'll just say that it's on the
Yeah.
25th. Kind of walk us through, what people can expect this book, some of the tropes, just all those things that, again, if someone's like, haven't picked up the series, why should they pick up this book today, tomorrow on the 25th.
Okay. So it's the whole series is small town. This one is forced proximity because it's forbidden because what has happened is that this woman Kate has come back to town to try to win back her husband who has asked for a divorce. And he wants nothing to do with her. And while she's plotting to win him back, she moves in with his best friend because she has nowhere else to go. And his best friend is this guy to whom she has always been attracted, and he's been in love with her from like the second he laid eyes on her. So there's like some forbidden romance, lots of forced proximity, and she ends up like working in his bar. So there's some workplace stuff.
Lots of tension, especially.
Yeah.
I want to know your thought process because, especially, if you read these in order, they can, I feel like be read standalone, but it's better if they're, interconnected. So you go from book one to book two, book three. For book two, we meet Kate already.
Yeah.
And in a way, some people may not like her.
Oh yeah.
How did you go about knowing, okay, well, I have to write, she's going to be my character for book three. How was that, redemption arc in a way, trying to make people be like, okay, I know you don't like her, but you need to now.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, like I'm reading the reviews and like every single review begins with, I really hated Kate at the start. And I really wasn't sure I was going to like this book. So I honestly, like, I feel like I kind of have like, it wasn't the smartest move for me and from a marketing perspective, because I think a lot of people probably won't read the book because they read about Kate in book two and they hated her. And she starts off pretty bad. And I mean, she's kind of the villain at the start of the book. So, um, yeah, it was, I mean, honestly, like it wasn't smart from a marketing perspective. I just really wanted to write her, and she was really fun to write. It's a lot more fun to write like a character who's messing up
Hmm.
than to write a character who's just trying to do the right thing all the time. So,
But I think, she still gets that redemption towards the
oh
end.
yeah,
By the end, you're like, it's very satisfying as a reader that the same thing. We're mad at them at the beginning, especially when they're doing things that they shouldn't. You're just like, I just want to strangle you. But then you get to
yeah,
the end. And it's fun to have like those full circle. Okay, you really went through a lot, but especially with this book, the fact that Beck is there for her so much. It's sweet. And you want to root for them, even though you're like, it's your ex's best friend. Like, I don't should I really be rooting for you?
yeah.
I think it's sweet overall, like how it comes together.
And I mean, for me, I really like stories where there's a really strong redemption arc. In a lot of books, especially in a lot of romance books, there's really not like a you know for me the more growth you because there's this whole thing about like brain I'm blanking on the word, which is ironic when I'm talking about the brain, but anyway, there's a whole thing where when they do MRIs, or I think it's an MRI or PET scan, when people are reading, their response psychologically is the same as if they were actually experiencing it. So if you are reading about a really treacherous hike where you might die, your brain is responding the same way as if it was happening to you. So, and there's this whole thing about how the reason people have always traditionally told stories is because that's how we grow and learn. And so we read stories because we want to know, what would I do if? And like that's like the inherent impulse to read. And so I think that when you see somebody who was really screwed up, for me, that's more rewarding because seeing how somebody can dig themselves, get themselves out of a hole that they've dug themselves into, it's like, you know, that's something that you can kind of learn from. So now I've made it sound really boring and preachy. I swear, anybody who's watching this, there's a lot of sex. It's not boring. But
No, and again, I don't think at all, I think what you just said is perfect. It allows you to experience different things and you feel it a lot more as a reader because exactly what you said, you're putting yourself in that perspective and you're like, okay, well, what would I do here? And you're like, if maybe you wouldn't do that, but then she does that, you're like, oh, come on, and you're like,
yeah,
you're trying to root for her to like make the right move and everything. And I think that makes it better than just like, oh, it's just a book full of sex. Not that we don't love that,
yeah,
but it's really good when you have a book that still has plenty of plot and like you see the characters develop and all those other things. And I think that again, fantastic in this book because you start the book and you're in a way hating her. By
yeah.
you feel that full redemption arc of everything that has happened.
Thank you. Yeah,
So
I'm
cool.
happy.
So what kind of walk us through too, people maybe obviously if they just jump in with this book, maybe that would, I don't know, it could work in a way because then you don't hate her as much and then you can go back and read, or
Yeah.
kind of, what is your process like? Do you prefer people to read them in order, or do you think they could just kind of be read at any point in time?
No, I mean, I think that they can be read at any point in time. Um, I mean, the only reason I would prefer that, like for me, and I shouldn't even be saying this, but for me, if I've like jumped into a series and I haven't read the first book, but I'm already like, there's like a little bit where you're like, oh, and that couple's happily married. Well, like for me, it's so dumb, but like I don't want to read the book now because I'm like, oh, I already. And it's like when you read a romance, you generally know that they're going to end up together in the end anyway. But having seen them together already, I'm like, ugh. I don't need to read about that because I already know they're together. So, I mean, I guess in that respect, I would like if people went through the series from the start, but I don't think it'll feel like you have to.
No, I think again,
Yeah.
I understand what you're saying with that because it's one thing to like, okay, I'm picking up this book. These are my two main characters. They're gonna fall in love by the end. Versus in another book, it's like, oh, they're married with two kids, and you're like,
Eh,
okay.
yeah. I already know how that turns out, but which is ridiculous because you always know how a romance is going to turn out, unless the author just really screws you over. So,
I feel like that has happened a very like few times, but
yes.
generally it's like a very happy feels and
I,
everything.
I keep saying I keep saying that one of these days I'm gonna have a romance that ends with like one of them dying, just so that like people will like not be so certain anymore. They'll like, go into one of my books like not really knowing what's gonna happen, but I'll probably never do
You're gonna get so many messages, Elizabeth!
it.
Why did you do this to me? Why did you break my heart?
I know.
That's awesome. So, with going with writing books and everything, obviously every book has to have a cover. So kind of walk me through what that process is, figuring out the cover, especially when we have some delicious males on some of these covers,
Yes.
picking out your models. What is all that process like?
So, okay, so funnily enough, I didn't know what I was going to be publishing after I finished the Devil series. And I was working, I don't even remember what I was working on, but it wasn't The Summer We Fell. It was something entirely different. And I was looking at guys for covers and I saw the picture of Sergio Caraval with the surfboard. And I was like, oh, damn. And I was like, I have to own this picture. And I was like, wait a minute, I have that book. And I basically finished the book because I saw that picture and I wanted to buy it. And like once you shell out for one of these photographs, you're like, oh, I'm out all this money. I got to publish a book now. So yeah, so I guess that's not what people want to hear. But yeah, so the reason The Summer We Fell came out was because I saw that photo and it was so perfect and I wanted to use it. Um,
Amazing.
but then and then basically after that I just had to find photos that kind of like they had to have a similar vibe. They had to be shirtless, they had to be outdoors, kind of beachy. So it's actually kind of sucked because I've like kind of written myself into this corner where I feel like it would be so much easier to do discreet covers because then you're not I'm like spending days at a time hunting for like a hot male model. Um, which I know it doesn't sound like a hard job, but it's actually it gets really tedious.
So I'd say I could think of worse jobs than having to sit on your screen and just look for.
Yeah, yeah. But it's funny because, like, obviously, like, I'm looking at these pictures of these men who are just fabulous. And none of them would go out with me in real life. But I'm like, I'm like, oh, he's too thin. Oh, I think his hands look small. Like, all these crazy, picky things that, like, like in real life, you would never be like that. But
That's incredible. You have to have the perfect person.
yeah,
As bad as it is, as readers, we're always like, don't judge a book by its cover, but we do.
yeah.
We totally do. So, you have to find that like perfect niche right where you want it so that people pick it up.
Yeah, and it's really, I mean, the thing is that like if I'm looking at even if a book has gotten like people are raving about a book, if the guy on the cover, like I don't like I shouldn't be saying this, but I will. Like like there's a whole like group of these male models that are like super greased up and they like to me they just look like they need a shower. But when I see one of those guys on the cover of a book, I'm like, "Oh, hygiene." And like even if people are raving about the book, I'm like, I don't know. I just like I'm kind of grossed out by the guy, which is stupid because it has nothing to do with the book. But yeah.
Do
So
you
that's
feel
always
like
kind of my head.
do you feel like you would ever think about doing discrete covers, or is it
Oh
just
yeah. So I've done discrete covers for the Devil series and the Parallel series, and I'll probably eventually do them for this one.
Mm-hmm.
It'll just be a while.
Do you? And you're the one that like picks all the covers for your books.
So for in the UK and Commonwealth countries, they get their own cover because that was bought by Hachette. So I don't have anything to do with that, and they've got discrete covers there. But
Awesome.
yeah, for the US and Canada, and like it's weird. I didn't realize until like all this, like how many countries are Commonwealth countries, but I think I only own the rights to the summer series in like 146 out of 290 countries or something crazy. So
Totally
in those
fair.
146 countries, it's the hot guy cover for now.
We can't complain about the Hawkeye
Yeah.
cover. We,
Yeah.
nothing wrong with that. Do you pick the you like your guy for the cover and then go back and finish the book, or do you have the book written and then you try to match the cover with like kind of what you're going for?
I both. I generally like. I had already written this book when I found that picture of Beck, and that picture was so perfect. The hair color wasn't quite perfect, but everything else about him was so perfect that I was like, "Oh, this is the guy." But I've already bought the covers for the next two books, and like book five is only 10% done at this point. So
Cool. I
yeah,
think that's one thing I didn't realize as a reader until starting to do these author interviews was that most authors said that you guys have your covers like way before you even write the book, and I was like, I wouldn't think that, but makes sense. But I didn't think it like that.
it's hard, actually. I mean, for me, it's hard because I'm cheap and these photos cost so much money that it's really hard to buy a cover for a book that you haven't written yet. Because what if you don't end up? And I did do that. I bought a really expensive photo that I don't think I'm going to end up using, and I'm just kicking myself because the guy doesn't fit. Like I thought he was going to be my Liam, and then when it came time for that's book four, and then when it came time to start getting a cover together, I was like, oh, this guy's not Liam at all. So now I'm stuck with this photo. So I don't normally do that, but I did. For book five, that's Harrison's story, and I have a really strong idea of what Harrison looks like. So
That's awesome.
yeah,
I love that. And I think it's again so unique, so different for each person. But that's really fun for me. So I like to ask this question too for authors, and I know it can be a little difficult, but not just with the summer series, but all of your series. Do
okay.
you have a favorite book that you have written?
It's probably a tie, but I mean, probably if I had to pick one, I would say, and it's the one that's like the least read of all of my books, but it's called Across Time. It's in my Parallel series, and yeah, that's probably my favorite.
And then with that, do you have a favorite couple that you have ever written? Is it either one from that one or is it from a different book that you have a favorite couple?
That's probably my favorite couple too, from Across Time. The guy is French, and he is like a super cranky, and yeah, he's delightful. So, and the main female character is a total badass. So they're probably my favorite.
Love that.
But
I have to always ask because every time you guys are like, it's like picking children, and you
yeah,
put a lot of time and effort into writing these books, but I love to hear the answers.
yeah,
That's so fun. So you're working on, wrapping up the summer series.
yeah.
Book 3 comes out on the 25th. Do you already have book 4's scheduled release and everything for when that's coming out too?
Yeah. So, well, I I think it's going to come out in late in May. May. I think right now I'm saying like May 22nd, but that could change.
Exciting.
Yeah.
And then you said the 5th book will be towards the end of the summer.
I think so. Some late summer, early fall. Yeah.
Exciting. And
Yeah.
are you working on, I know you mentioned you already have, an eighth of a book written for 2025. So is that going to be like another series potentially that you're doing, or maybe a standalone? Anything
Right.
that you can tease?
Right now, it's a standalone. Although I got to say that one of my very close friends who's like in the industry was like, when I told her I was thinking about doing a standalone, she was like, "What the hell, dude? Like, what are you thinking?" And it's a really bad idea. But right now, it's a standalone.
I don't think, like, yes, people want to read series, but sometimes I really just want to pick up, one
Yeah,
romance book, love it. fall in love with the characters, and then if I ever want to go back through a reread, it's like I don't have to read the whole series. I can just read them, fall in love with them right then and there, and then it's
Yeah, I mean, I'm the same way, but I just think that like as far as marketing goes, it like does a lot of the marketing for you if it's a series because all the people who read book one and have met a character want to read book two and continue, and like you lose that whole segment. But yeah, I like standalones too. So
I think that's
we'll see.
awesome. Well, as we kind of start to wrap things up here
Uh,
to the end, is there anything that I haven't asked that maybe, again, with the book coming out on the 25th, that you want to talk about, or specifically the summer series, or maybe another series, just for people to jump in and start reading your books?
um, I think not necessarily. I hope people will give Kate a chance. She does start off a villain. She doesn't start off as a great human being, but most of the reviewer, like I've been reading the reviews, which I'm going to stop doing. But I read the reviews early on and then I stop. But everybody seems to come around to her for the most part. So I hope people will read it. But if they've already read the series, they should check out the Devil series. I would say that like that's probably my favorite series that I've done. So yeah.
Exciting. And where can people best both connect with you? And then where can they best find all of your books and everything if they want to jump into either one of these series?
Um, uh, in the US and Canada, Amazon to find them. In the UK, I have no idea, probably Amazon, but I don't know. Um, and uh, and I'm on Facebook at Elizabeth O'Rourke Books or elizabetho'rourke.com.
Awesome. And I follow you on Instagram and stuff, and you post some
Yeah.
stuff on there too that people could connect with you that way
Yes.
also.
Yes.
Awesome.
Elizabeth O'Rourke on Instagram too.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for jumping on here today and chatting with me and talking about these books. I had
Thank
so much fun
you.
talking to you.
Yeah, this is great. Thank you so much.
And you guys make sure that you're staying subscribed to everything that's happening here at Michaela's Book Nook for more author interviews and things to come. And until next time, thanks, guys.
Bye. Thank you.